Welcome to the Eastern Mediterranean Climate and Health Responders course. My name is Cecilia Sorensen. I met many of you earlier in this course. I'm the director of the Global Consortium on Climate and Health Education based at Columbia University. And I'm here today with a message of hope that you and your loved ones are safe during these very difficult times. And on behalf of the Global Consortium on Climate and Health, our thoughts are with all of you. We've been debating over the past couple of days how to proceed with this course, and we have decided that we remain committed to making this training as strong and as meaningful as the many GCCHE programs have successfully delivered in the past. So our intention is to continue the course and bring it to a successful conclusion. At the same time, we fully recognize that the current situation may create challenges both for our participants as well as for our speakers. And so for this reason, we kindly ask for your understanding and your flexibility. We may need to complement sessions with recordings if necessary, and also we may need to adjust the schedule to accommodate speaker availability and safety moving forward. We also want to let you know that we are fully prepared to allow flexible attendance requirements so that everybody can access the sessions when they are safe and able to do so. So with that message, we're very excited to welcome you to session 4, which will be on food security and nutrition. We have simultaneous interpretation available in Arabic. To access the interpretation, you simply select the globe button on the bottom of the screen, and you will be able to hear Arabic on that translation line. We also have closed caption available, and to access the closed caption, you simply touch this closed caption button at the bottom of your screen. So these are our course objectives. These have not changed. Our goal of this course is really to enhance the knowledge, confidence, and communication skills of both current and future health professionals concerning the health impacts of climate change. And this course is really geared towards changing practice, to really saying, how can we take what we understand about climate change and apply it directly to our practice, whether that be public health, medicine, health administration, health systems, emergency response, and so on and so forth. So here we are in our course schedule. It's March 4th, and we are on session 4 on food security and nutrition. These are our learning objectives for our session. These are all available online for your reference. I won't read through all of them, but we have learning objectives guiding each of our sessions that we're hoping will be able to be imparted for you at the end of this lecture. Now, as I mentioned, we are changing the attendance requirements due to the unstable situation in the region. So the course will now operate with both synchronous and asynchronous options. So if you can, please join the live sessions on the Zoom when possible. But if you're unable to, we will have the recordings posted on YouTube within 48 hours. We will also have a Google Docs option where you will be able to download the lecture directly from the Google Docs platform to be able to watch asynchronously. Our goal is really to ensure that no participant is disadvantaged due to circumstances beyond their control. Our requirements for the certificate have also become more flexible. So we will continue to take attendance. There will continue to be a final exam, but regarding the attendance, we know some people will have to take or watch some of the lectures asynchronously, and we will simply be sending a form to all participants at the end to confirm that they have watched at least 7 out of the 10 sessions, and we trust your professionalism and integrity to report accurately that you have actually watched 7 sessions of this course. If you have any questions about this change, please feel free to reach out to our staff at any time, and we'll be happy to clarify any questions you may have. Again, we have a WhatsApp group. You're welcome to join. We'll be posting updates around the course in this channel, and we'll also be updating you with any recently published articles or any communications from our speakers. So please join the WhatsApp group if that is something you are interested in. So without further ado, I'm so delighted to welcome our speaker for this session 4 in the Eastern Mediterranean course. Dr. Maureen Mujtaba is an expert in climate change and environmental health with over a decade of experience advising United Nations agencies, international non-governmental organizations, and multilateral development banks. She is an associate professor in the Department of Climate Change, Environmental Health and Management at the Health Services Academy and serves as a technical advisor with DOP ASI, a nonprofit organization focused on advancing equitable health outcomes. Dr. Marine is also a member of the Sustainable Development Solutions Network in Pakistan and a contributing author to the Lancet Countdown on Health and Climate Change. Dr. Marine has led a climate and health vulnerability assessment, as well as a technical needs assessment for Pakistan, and her work on equity and gender-focused community climate resilience has been highlighted at the Global Conference on Climate Change and Health. So we are so delighted to have such a prolific speaker to come to us today to talk about food security and climate change. Over to you.
Yeah, hi. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for the introduction. I hope everyone is safe wherever they are, and Ramadan Mubarak to most of my colleagues around the world. It is an honor for me to address you today on a subject that sits at the intersection of my professional journey as a climate and health researcher, as a policymaker with Pakistan's Ministry of Health, as well as an advocate for nutrition security in the world's most climate sensitive and climate vulnerable regions. The story of food security in our region is increasingly written by the climate. Can we go on the next slide, please? So today we will examine how the Eastern Mediterranean region, a region which is warming nearly 20% faster than the global average, is navigating this crisis. We will explore the tools we have to anticipate food insecurity before it becomes famine. We will identify the populations and the geographies most at risk, and crucially, we will examine evidence-based strategies drawn from the field that are building resilience from the ground up. Today, we will dissect how extreme heat, drought, and unpredictable rain are not just environmental issues, but direct, potent threats to the bread baskets, livelihoods, and nutritional health of millions across the Eastern Mediterranean region, from North Africa all the way to Pakistan. We will move from diagnosing this complex nexus to exploring concrete tools for forecasting crises, and most importantly, building tangible community-led resilience. So let us begin. Next slide, please. So in this 35 minutes, I will connect the dots between climate science, agricultural vulnerability, and public health outcomes. I will move from diagnosing the problem to exploring actionable tools and solutions grounded in regional realities. This journey is structured to move from foundational understanding to actionable strategies, beginning by connecting climate science to the dinner plate. Then exploring how we can anticipate shocks before they cause hunger. I will map out vulnerability, identifying not just where climate shocks are most severe, but where underlying social, economic, and institutional fragility converts these shocks into full-blown nutritional crisis. We will together examine the multi-pronged strategy for building resilience, spanning agricultural practices, genetic innovations, and community-led as well as community-based social interventions. But most importantly, I will ground these strategies in 3 concrete case studies from Pakistan, a country that I know intimately and one that exemplifies both the depth of climate vulnerability and the height of adaptive innovation in our region. Now, this session will conclude with synthesis and actionable policy takeaways, the lessons I carry from my work at the intersection of science, policy, and practice, and which I hope will inform your own thinking and your work. Next slide, please. So let me state this as clearly as I can. Climate change is not a distant environmental concern. It is direct, immediate, and it is multiplicative stressor on every single link to the food value chain, from the seed in the ground to the nutritional status of a child living in any country and any city of the Eastern Mediterranean region. When we speak of the climate, food, nutrition nexus, we are describing a complex system with feedback loops that amplify vulnerability. A drought does not simply reduce the quality of food that is available, but it changes the quality of food, not just the quantity of food, but also the quality of food. It forces households to shift their consumption from diverse, nutritious food, vegetables, fruits, and animal source proteins, to cheaper, calorie-dense staples that fill stomachs but starve bodies of essential micronutrients. Now, this is the phenomena we call hidden hunger, micronutrient deficiency. This may not manifest as visibly wasting, but nonetheless impairs the cognitive development, reduces the immune function, and traps generations in a cycle of poor health and lost potential. Moreover, this nexus has a profound gender dimension. Women are often the primary food producers, the primary caregivers, and the ones who sacrifice their own nutritional intake first when food becomes scarce. So climate shocks therefore exacerbate existing gender inequalities, with cascading consequences for maternal and child health. Understanding this nexus is not just an academic exercise, it is the essential foundation for designing interventions that address the root causes rather than just treating the symptoms. Can we go ahead, please? Next slide, please. So let me be specific about the primary drivers of this disruption, because precision matters in designing policies. Now, first of all, rising temperatures and heat waves. The Eastern Mediterranean is a climate change hotspot. Data from the UN Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia confirms that our region is warming nearly 20% faster than the global mean. For staple crops like wheat, which is the backbone of diet from Morocco to Pakistan, each degree Celsius above the optimal range during the grain filling period reduces yield by approximately 10%. This is not a future projection. This is happening right now. So, for instance, in Jacobabad, Pakistan, which I have visited multiple times in my capacity as Director for Climate Change and Health, as well as Nutrition, we have recorded wet bulb temperatures exceeding the human survivability threshold of 35 degrees centigrade. This is a threshold which was once thought impossible outside the climate models, but we are experiencing it right now. Secondly, intensifying droughts. The 2007 to 2010 drought in Syria is the starkest warning. Climate scientists have documented that this drought, which led to 75% agricultural failure and displaced 1.5 million rural families, was made 2 to 3 times more likely by anthropogenic climate change. These displaced populations moved to urban peripheries, exacerbating social tensions in the years which were preceding the conflict in the area. So drought is not just an agricultural issue, but it also turned out to be a security issue in this region. Now, thirdly, erratic precipitations. Climate change does not simply reduce rainfall, it disrupts the patterns. We are seeing a shift from gentle soaking rains that replenishes the soil moisture to intense destructive downpours, which cause flash floodings, which cause wash away of the topsoil, and it contaminates the water sources. Pakistan's 2022 floods, which submerged 1/3 of the country, were preceded by a severe heat wave, and this was followed by disease outbreaks, a cascading climate and health emergency. Next slide, please. So the ultimate metric of our success or failure is measured in human health and potential. If you look at this cascade, it shows you how a climate shock travels through the food system to manifest as malnutrition. A drought does not just cause hunger, it forces impossible choices alongside. When the crisis deepens, families adopt more desperate strategies, selling productive assets like their goats or their lands, taking children out of school, migrating to more fertile agricultural areas or in search of work. Now, these decisions have long-term consequences that persist long after the rains return. The nutrition outcomes are threefold. First, acute malnutrition or wasting, where children become dangerously thin and face imminent risk of death. Second, chronic malnutrition or stunting, where prolonged undernutrition irreversibly impairs the physical as well as the cognitive development of children. Thirdly, micronutrient deficiencies like iron, zinc, vitamin A. They may not be visible, but compromise the immune function, increase disease susceptibility, and trap generations in poor health. So in my work with the Ministry of Health in Pakistan, we have documented stunting rates exceeding 48% in flood affected districts. Now, these are far above the national average of 40%, which is still way higher than WHO thresholds. These numbers represent children whose life trajectories have been altered by climate shocks. This is the public health imperative that should drive our work forward in the region and even beyond the region. Next slide, please. So, in the face of these cascading risks, waiting for visible famine is both a moral and operational failure. The humanitarian and development communities have learned a hard lesson over decades. Acting early saves lives, and it also saves money. Every dollar spent on early education, early action, saves up to $7 in emergency response costs. This is why the shift to anticipatory action using predictive analytics to trigger interventions before a climate crisis peaks is perhaps the most significant advance in food security practices in our generation. Now, the toolbox we now possess integrates data from multiple different sources, from space, from satellite monitoring, rainfall, to vegetation health, as well as soil moisture, and this is all done in near real time. So on the ground, we track market prices, we conduct nutrition surveys, and collect livelihood data. Sophisticated models combine these streams to generate probabilistic forecasts, the likelihood of drought, the expected impact on crop yields, the projected number of people who will slip into crisis. These tools do not predict the future with clarity, but they give us a window of opportunity, maybe 3 months to 6 months, to preposition supplies, to distribute cash transfers, and to protect livelihoods before the worst occurs. Next slide, please. So I'm now going to walk you through the specific instruments in this particular toolbox that I was talking about. And understanding them is essential for any policymaker as well as for any practitioner working at the climate, nutrition, and health nexus. We combine the view from the space, which is in the form of satellite data on rain and crop health, and we combine this with the view from the ground, which is market prices, nutritional surveys, and field reports. So for climate and environmental monitoring, we rely on satellite-based systems. CHIRPS provides high-resolution rainfall data, which dates back to 1981, and this allows us to track anomalies against historical baselines. NASA's MODIS sensors calculate the normalized difference vegetation index, essentially how green the landscape is, and this gives us a real-time proxy for crop health. Regional climate centers under the WMO, World Meteorological Organization, provide seasonal forecasts that predict temperature and precipitation anomalies months in advance. For food security analysts, the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification, or IPC, is the global gold standard. The IPC harmonizes multiple data streams: climate, market, nutrition, conflict into a common 5-phase scale, from minimal, which is phase 1, to famine, which is under phase 5. This common language allows governments, UN agencies, and NGOs to conduct as well as coordinate around a shared understanding of the severity of the situation. The integration of these tools into early warning systems, which most of the countries in this region have, like FuseNet and FAO's GIEWS, produces actionable alerts. When these systems flag a deteriorating situation, they trigger what we call early action protocols and pre-agreed plans that release funding, and these mobilize resources before a formal emergency is declared. So in Pakistan, what we are doing is we are trying to institutionalize these tools into our National Disaster Management Authority as well as our provincial disaster management authorities in close coordination with the nutrition departments. The goal is to move from a culture of crisis response to a culture of risk management. So we can move ahead now. While discussing all this, we have to remember that not all places are equally at risk. Vulnerability is layered. It is a function of 3 interesting factors: exposure to climate hazards, sensitivity of livelihoods and systems, and adaptive capacity, the resources and the institutions that are available to cope. When we map these factors across the Eastern Mediterranean region, distinct hotspots emerge. The rain-fed agricultural zones of Syria, Iraq, and Pakistan are highly exposed to rainfall vulnerabilities and variabilities. These are areas where farmers historically depend directly on seasonal rains. With limited irrigation infrastructure, a single failed rainy season can devastate household food security for millions. The delta regions, Egypt's Nile Delta and Pakistan's Indus Delta, face a different threat: seawater intrusion. A sea level rise and upstream water withdrawals reduce river flows. Saltwater pushes inward, salinizing the soil and the groundwater. The Indus Delta alone has lost over 6 million hectares to salinity. The land that once produced food now lies barren. The arid and semi-arid land supporting pastoralist communities from Somalia through Sudan through Balochistan in Pakistan, they're all characterized by high sensitivity. Pastoralists depend on mobile livestock production, which is exquisitely sensitive to rainfall patterns. When drought kills herds, they lose not just their livelihood, but their cultural identity and social safety networks. Finally, the urban peripheries of the major cities, for instance, Karachi, Cairo, Damascus, Casablanca, you name any city in the Eastern Mediterranean region, they're all emerging as vulnerability hotspots of a different kind. These informal settlements receive climate-displaced populations from all the surrounding rural areas, adding strain to the already inadequate services. Urban food insecurity is different from rural food insecurity. It is driven less by food production than by access, income, and market integration. So we can now go to the next slide, please. So when we forecast, it tells us where the fire will start. Resilience is about fireproofing our landscape. This requires action on multiple fronts simultaneously. The first pillar is climate-smart agricultural practices, the on-farm innovations that increase productivity while reducing emissions and building an adaptive capacity. This includes water-efficient irrigation, soil health management, and diversification of production systems. The second pillar is genetic innovations, developing crop varieties that can thrive under stress, drought-tolerant wheat, heat-resistant pulses, salt-tolerant rice. This is not a quick fix. It requires sustained investment in public agricultural research as well as robust seed systems. The third pillar is social capital and community-based innovations. This is extremely important. Technology alone is not sufficient. Resilience is built by people, and we have to remember that. Together, through cooperatives, through women groups, through seed banks, and through social safety nets that protect the most vulnerable, we can achieve all the above pillars. The fourth pillar is enabling policies and institutions. Farmers cannot adopt new practices without access to credit, to extension services, and functioning markets. So national policies in each and every country in the EMRO region must create incentives for sustainable practices and disincentivize maladaptive ones. This is important in nowadays emerging climate sensitive hotspot countries. This would require bringing the institutional silos that too often separate agriculture, water, health, and climate ministries. All these ministries need to sit across the table and discuss how they're going to look into climate vulnerabilities, especially related to nutrition in their areas. These four pillars are all interdependent. The drought-tolerant seed is useless without the irrigation system. A woman cooperative cannot thrive without market access policies. Building resilience means strengthening all four pillars simultaneously. Next slide, please. So the first pillar is about working with nature's logic. Climate smart agricultural practices is where resilience meets the soil. So these are the techniques that farmers can adopt with appropriate support to produce more food with fewer resources while buffering against the climate shocks. Water efficiency is the highest priority in our water scarce region. Moving from flood irrigation, where water is simply released into flood, much of it is evaporated or it is running off, to precision systems like drip irrigation, we can reduce water use by 30 to 60% while increasing yield by 20 to 50%. The economics for all this are really compelling, but the upfront cost is often prohibitive for small farm holders. So this is where public investment and subsidiary reforms become crucial and critical, and this is the work of the policymakers. Soil health is the foundation of agricultural productivity. Practices like conservation agriculture, minimal tillage, permanent soil cover, crop rotation, build organic matter, which act as a sponge holding moisture during a dry spell and reduce erosion during heavy rainfalls. Healthy soil sequesters carbon, providing a mitigation co-benefit while building adaptation. Diversification through agroforestry, intercropping, or integrated crop livestock system reduces the risk. If one crop fails, others may survive. Trees create microclimates that moderate the temperature. So integrating livestock provides manure for fertilizers and a buffer acid that can be sold in hard times. These practices are not exotic and they're not experimental. We and our region has been doing these for a long time. They're all proven, they're all scalable, and they are all ready for investment. The barrier is actually not knowledge, it is policy as well as finance. So next slide, please. Biology is our ally. We need to remember that. We need crops that can withstand the new climatic extremes. The second pillar, which I was talking about earlier, is about genetic innovations, and it represents our investment in the biological toolkit that farmers will need for the harsher climates. For decades, international agricultural research centers have been developing crop varieties with built-in stress tolerance. ICARDA, based in our region, has released drought-tolerant wheat varieties that maintain yield under water stress. Pakistan's own NARC has developed salt-tolerant rice varieties, and these can grow in increasingly saline soils of the Indus Delta. So the Atomic Energy Agriculture Research Center sector in Pakistan has also pioneered work on halophytes, plants like Salicornia that thrive in seawater and produce oil, fodder, and they are potentially biofuels also. Now, this work draws on both modern biotechnology as well as traditional knowledge, which is present in this region. Farmers have been selecting and saving seeds adapted to local conditions for millennia. These land acres locally adapted varieties are a genetic treasure trove. The challenge is to conserve this diversity, characterize it, and incorporate it into formal breeding programs. But genetic innovation alone is also insufficient, and it must be paired with seed systems that get these improved varieties into the farmers' hands. Too often, promising varieties sit in research laboratories while farmers plant whatever seeds are available to them in the local market. So strengthening the public-private sector is a critical policy priority. And this is a long game, and it will depend on developing and releasing new varieties, which could take a longer time. So this is the time that we need to start investing in genetic innovation, and failure to invest today guarantees a tomorrow which will have fewer options for adaptation. Next slide, please. Yeah. So technology and seeds are useless, as I mentioned before, without social foundations. Resilience is built by people together. Community seed banks preserve locally adapted genetic diversity. Women cooperatives for processing, marketing add value to the harvest. They reduce the waste and they empower the key agents of household nutrition. Climate-informed social protection like forecast-based cash transfers provide a financial cushion before a drought forces families to sell their last goat, or they take the children out of their schools or move from their agri lands because of the climatic shocks. Digital extension services deliver hyper-local weather alerts and ergonomic advice directly to farmers' phones. These social innovations ensure technical solutions are adopted, they are sustained, and they are equitable. Next slide, please. Yeah. So now we'll ground our discussion in real-world examples that illustrate the integration of these strategies. These strategies are not theoretical. They are being lived and they are being proven across our region. Now, let's focus on how three concrete examples from Pakistan, a nation that is embodying both profound climate vulnerability and remarkable grassroots level innovations in its agricultural heartlands. So we can go to the next slide for the first case study from Pakistan. Pakistan's Indus Basin irrigation system is the largest contiguous irrigation system in the world, and it serves over 18 million hectares. It is a marvel of engineering and a lifeline for millions of farmers. It is also an extraordinarily inefficient. Before intervention, unlined water courses were there, and the smaller channels that distributed water from the canals to the individual farms would lose about 40 to 50% of the water to seepage and evaporation. Water that was meant for the crops never reached the fields. So at the tail end, farmers, those at the far end of the system, received practically no water at all. Perpetually, there was inequality as well as conflict. The Punjab Irrigated Agricultural Productivity Improvement Project, which is a local project in one of the major provinces of Pakistan, it was supported by World Bank, and it has lined thousands of kilometers of these water courses with concrete, and the results are transformative. Water losses have been reduced to 10 to 15%, whereas initially they were 40 to 50%. Tail-end farmers now receive reliable water supplies. Cropped areas have increased by 15 to 20%. The yields are up Conflicts over water have decreased. Now, this is arguably one of the most impactful climate adaptation infrastructure projects in South Asia. It addresses the fundamental constraint, which is water scarcity, and does so at the scale of millions of smallholders. So it is not glamorous, but it is a great piece of work which has been done locally, and it offers a replicable model for any country that is facing irrigation inefficiency. Now we'll move to case study number 2. As I mentioned earlier, the Indus Delta in southern Sindh is one of the front lines of climate change. Reduced river flow due to upstream diversions and climate-altered hydrology combined with sea level rise have allowed seawater to intrude deep into the delta. Over 6 million hectares of agricultural land have been salinized, rendered infertile for traditional crops. Now, for decades, this was viewed as a story of irreversible loss. Communities watched their fields turn white with salt, their livelihoods destroyed, their children migrating to cities in search of work. But Pakistani scientists have refused to accept this as the final chapter, fortunately. The Atomic Energy Agriculture Research Center, working with the provincial agricultural universities as well as international partners, has developed and promoted soil-tolerant crops. Salicornia is the flagship success in this region. This remarkable plant, which is a helophyte or a salt lover, thrives in seawater. It produces oil-rich seeds that are processed for human consumption, and they're also being used for biofuel. And its stems provide high protein fodder for the livestock. So farmers who had abandoned their land are now harvesting this particular crop, and they are selling it to feed the mills as well as the oil processors. So it's a win-win situation for everyone. This is a prime example of a transformational adaptation. It does not try to preserve a dying system. It pivots to a new system built on different biological foundations, but it's suited to the new reality. It requires scientific innovation, extension services to train the farmers how to sow the new crops, and market which is developed for novel products. However, it demonstrates that even severe environmental degradation need not be the end of agriculture in certain areas of the world. Coming to case number 3. Next slide, please. So case study 3 is the citizen entrepreneur model in the arid regions. True resilience is economics. In Pakistan's driest landscapes, the most innovative strategy has been to build businesses that thrive because of the harsh climate, not in spite of it. By identifying native drought-proof species like moringa, which is like a big fad nowadays everywhere in the world, and cactus pear, and training the local entrepreneurs, especially women, we have created marketable products. This model builds a climate-proof local economy. It reduces dependency on failing monsoon rains, and it keeps communities intact by providing income as well as improved nutrition. This community-based adaptation at its most powerful and sustainable. Now, the challenge in this area was, and some parts of Pakistan was, that there were recurrent droughts which were devastating the farming sector, leading to poverty, debt, and distress migration. Innovations like this have resulted in 15,000 women entrepreneurs who have been trained. More than 3,000 micro enterprises have been established, and products are reaching the national market through partnership with major retailers. Now, this is a powerful example of citizen entrepreneurship as a climate adaptive case study. Can we move to the next slide, please? So after this journey through science and through policy and practice, let me synthesize the 5 key takeaways for the policymakers who are listening to me today, as well as the practitioners. These are lessons that I carry from my work at the intersection of climate, health, and nutrition, and which I believe are essential for any serious effort to build food security in our region. First, integrate climate data into food security planning. We have the tools to anticipate crisis months in advance. The barrier is no longer technical, it is institutional. We must embed these forecasting systems into national and provincial planning processes, and we must create protocols that trigger early action automatically when thresholds are crossed. Secondly, invest in public agricultural research and development. The seeds that farmers plant in 2040 are being developed in laboratories today. Genetic innovation is a long game, and failure to invest now guarantees a future with fewer adaptation options. This is a core public goods function, then markets will be provided at scale. Number three, prioritize radical water efficiency in our water scarce region. Every tiny little drop counts, from lining water courses to promoting precision irrigation to treating and reducing wastewater. We must pursue every avenue for getting more crop per drop. Water is not just an agricultural input, it is the currency of adaptation in this region. Fourthly, design for equity. The most vulnerable, smallholder farmers, pastoralists, women, the urban poor are often excluded from mainstream programs. Resilience interventions must be deliberately designed to reach them, using mechanisms like gender-targeted extensions, social protection linkages, and community-based organizing. Fifth and finally, bridge the institutional silos. Climate, agriculture, water, health, social protection, they're not separate domains. They are all interconnected systems that must be governed in an integrated way. This requires new institutional mechanisms, interministerial committees, joint planning processes, shared data platforms, and that will force collaboration and it will break down the bureaucratic barriers which are very rampant in this region. These are all not easy tasks, but the cost of inaction is measured in the form of stunted children, displaced families, and lost potentials. The tools and strategies exist. Our task is to implement them with the urgency, with the scale, and with integration that this existential challenge demands from all of us. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you for bearing with me. The story of food security in Eastern Mediterranean is not yet written. It will be determined by the choices we make in the coming years, whether we invest in the tools we have, whether we reach the most vulnerable, whether we break down the silos that fragment our efforts. I thank you all for your attention as well as your engagement. I look forward to your questions and the discussion that will follow. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mushtaba. This has been an incredible learning opportunity. And obviously, you've spent so much time thinking about these challenges and these solutions. And really, I'm amazed at how much hope you have. It really is very refreshing to think about the framing in terms of a solution lens. So thank you so much for sharing really great insights. We have many questions from the participants today, so we'll get started with the discussion. So the first question that came up is, when we're thinking about heat waves and we're thinking about precipitation changes as a result of climate change, what can be done really at the household level in areas which depend on rain-fed agriculture? I think you mentioned many sort of, I think, larger programs that are very well structured, but granted, those are not going to cover the entire region. What can be done really at the household level, and what should we be promoting from a health sector perspective? Oh, you're muted.
Okay. Yeah, from the household sector, again, see, it's the vulnerable communities and the smallholder farmers that are getting most in our region. They are getting the brunt of climate change and its impacts. for them, first of all, institution and policies have to be strengthened to kind of support these small household and the small farmers. At the household level, I would be more interested in government policies and social protection nets, looking at how climate change is going to impact the families. Like, for instance, I'm just going to quote an instance. In Pakistan, we have Benazir Income Support Program. That is for the poorest of the poor. And these are the families that cannot afford nutritious diet for their children. Stunting rates are very high in some of the communities, even up to 60%. So I would look into it in arid areas of Sindh and Balochistan, social protection nets, which gives safety to families whenever there are climate shocks. That's kind of something at the household level which I can think of. I'm open to listening from the participants. What are they doing in their region? But what we are doing right now is the social protection net. Apart from rain harvesting, giving people tools and training the communities as well as the community health workers who are actually the first responders whenever a climate shock happens, as to how to urge the communities to adapt, as well as how to mitigate the impacts of climate change. So one for me is the role of community health workers, and second is the social protection nets. These are the two which I think are more accessible to the rural and the poor and the vulnerable communities.
Thank you. Yeah, that's very insightful. And if anybody in the chat is working from a similar region and has other ideas in terms of what measures can be really taken at the household level, we'd welcome you to put them in the chat right now. The next question we have is around the question of if there are indigenous practices that enable sustainable food security systems, and how can we leverage those indigenous practices to improve food security in a changing climate?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I really like this question because, as I mentioned during the presentation and a lot of other presentations, sometimes whether we are talking about heat waves or we are talking about food security or whatever we are talking about, we always tend to forget the indigenous knowledge. And we tend to not have them as part of the conversation. And it's very important as policymakers, as well as climate and health practitioners, whether we are looking at heat waves, whether we are looking at any form of climate impacts in our region, the indigenous knowledge that already exists, we need to highlight those, and we need to kind of make policies around those, because that indigenous knowledge can teach us a lot as policymakers. In all fairness, whenever I visited any one of the districts, we sit in our boardrooms and we discuss a lot of fancy things which we want to go and do at the community level. And when you reach there, you're pleasantly surprised to know that there are a lot of new things that you learn from them. So my advice to all the policymakers and practitioners listening to our conversation today is listen to the voices from the communities and make them a part of the policy package that you're going to take to them.
Yeah.
That was the question, right?
Yeah, that's the question. And thinking about how we can really elevate these practices and spread the knowledge that is already, the ingenuity that's already coming from people who have been affected. And I think your point is well taken.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So there were several questions in the chat, and we're curious what you think about, the genetic modification world, and does that pose any risks that we should be worrying about? I think we're sort of at this point now where when we have places that are completely inundated with salt water and there's no, native food crops that can be grown there, we're turning towards, halophytes and genetically modified halophytes to be able to meet food security needs. And I think the question that the audience is grappling with is that going to cause problems that are going to be worse than the drought itself? And curious what your thoughts are in terms of any risks associated with genetically modified plants as a response to crop failure.
Okay, so my answer to this question is a question. Do we really have a choice? You know,
Mm.
when you go and visit communities where the stunting rates are at 60% because of a drought over a decade, they haven't had any nutritious food on their plate. Yes, sometimes the quantity is there. There's a food which is like there's a plate which is full of food, but is that meeting the micronutrient requirements of a child or a pregnant woman? That's my question. So, do we really have a choice right now? Because looking at Pakistan right after when we had our floods in 2022 and previously when we had them in 2010, when a large portion of the country was inundated with flood water, and there was a lot of salinity in the southern parts of the country, the stunting and the wasting rates that we saw after that were very high. So we kind of have to think: do we have any other alternatives? What my suggestion. And obviously I'm not into the agricultural sector. I'm a public health professional with a climate and health lens that I look at everything through. Would be like, for instance, in Pakistan, the atomic energy, which looks into the agricultural research and all that, and our university, we would like to urge them to sit across the public health professionals and develop crop varieties that are dense in micronutrients. So, as public health professionals, our job would be to sit with them, break the silos between health and agriculture, sit with our researchers, and try to ask them whether the crop varieties they're developing for, let's say, an area with salinity, whether it is high in micronutrients, and would that meet the requirements of a pregnant woman and a child?
Mhm.
That's how I would look at it.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. We have to be breaking down silos and having the health conversation be part of the innovation in agricultural conversation, because I think there is a lot of concern among some people around genetically modified, agricultural crops. Yet when you're sitting in front of, starving, malnourished communities, what are we to do, right? And I think that that's a very difficult question, and that really demands an empathetic response, but also one that's well thought through. And we're in unprecedented times, and we're making hard decisions. And so I think, as you're mentioning, we need more conversation about this. We need to break down the silos, and we honestly need more research. I think there's a lot of concern about genetically modified organisms, and I think there's more questions than we have answers. I think more research is going to really help us to understand what are the health risks and is it worth it? I think there's still unanswered questions, but I know you're sort of in the moment here and seeing communities that are just being so deeply affected by stunting and malnutrition that we have to do something. And it's difficult. So thank you. You mentioned that, women are most often affected by food insecurity, and I'm curious what your take is on how our policy responses can really build the appropriate safety nets for women farmers. How can we incorporate that knowing of inequalities related to food security into policy?
Okay, so again, that brings us to working with the community health workers,
Mm.
so that, like we were discussing previously, there are trainings for the community health workers so that they are the ones who have access to every household in a village setting or in a small rural community setting, so that they can tell women what are their dietary requirements during pregnancy, before pregnancy, at different stages of their lives,
Mhm.
and giving incentives to women entrepreneurs
Mm.
and women farmers through social security nets for them to be able to earn their wages and make choices about how they want to spend that money. So, in this part of the world, just because women do not have financial independence, they do not make choices about what is going to be on the table. And it's usually the woman, she's the last one to put food on her table, on in her plate. and that also the leftover ones. So giving financial security to a woman, the way we did with Benazir Income Support Program, we have seen the impact. The woman has cash in her hand and she has the authority and she knows how she wants to spend that money. So I think incentives like that, social protection nets, giving, empowering women with training of how they would like to do things for their families, for their children. I think that would have a huge impact in our region because by and large, we have the same issues across the region.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so when people have money, they can make decisions, and that's that holds true anywhere in the world. And
Anywhere in the
how
world.
we need to kind of keep thinking about how to get money into the hands of women to make decisions which oftentimes are in the interest of the health of their children and their families and their communities. So that's just so important. We have a question from one of our audience members. When you're talking about agricultural innovations, how are these communicated to subsistence farmers? And are they deemed to be acceptable? How is that, what does that look like in practice? And are these innovations affordable and accessible to those who need it?
Okay. So during the presentation, that's what I was talking about. A lot of times, unfortunately, the seeds that are that have been developed are sitting in the research labs. They're not in the hands of the farmers, at least the smallholder farmers. Financial incentives are not there. That's a big gap which is missing. The large farm holders, the landlords and the large landowners, they have access to more innovative technologies and climate resilient crops and all that. But the smallholder farmers are usually out of that access. So there is inequity here. What we need to do is break that through policy interventions, giving subsidies, better subsidies to small farm holders rather than the ones who own big chunks of land. You can, yeah. I mean, I think that's how we can go about it in our local context. I mean, most of the things that I'm seeing is how I've been seeing in Pakistan. So I think that's the only thing we can do. But I just wanted to remind everyone, I'm not working in the agriculture sector. I'm mostly public health. So a lot of agriculture related issues and things that are being done, I'm not really aware of them. I was working because I was Director Climate Change and Health as well as Director Nutrition. So I was working closely with FAO and how we can, increase the bread basket for the poor communities. We were trying to launch an initiative called Initiative on Climate and Nutrition, again, where the same things like giving empowerment to women, conditional cash transfers to women in the small households and small farm holders. So these were the kind of things we were working on. As far as agricultural seeds and all that is concerned, honestly, I mean, we were supposed to have a colleague from FAO. Yeah, I'm being very candid here.
No, it's amazing to have you and all your knowledge. And you're one of these really unique people who is spreading silos. And I think that that's incredible, right? To be a health professional who's talking about climate and agriculture. And, I mean, we need more of this. And we so appreciate your perspective. Speaking of health impacts, there's a question here, somebody here wants to hear more about saltwater and when it inundates sort of agricultural settings, what other health impacts do we see beyond malnutrition from crop failure as a result of saltwater intrusion?
So what we were seeing post floods 2022 in the areas which had saltwater intrusion was high numbers of diarrhea cases because the groundwater got contaminated by the seawater. So obviously people mostly don't have access to clean drinking water and they're going to the wells to take water. There was that problem. There was contamination of the wells this is what we looked at in the parts of the country where we had saltwater intrusion. Crop yields went down to zero because for a long time there was water standing in those areas. So the farmers moved away from those areas because they could not grow anything. So apart from malnutrition, we saw a lot of under 5 morbidity and mortality, partly, not just partly, a lot because of diarrheal diseases. And then apart from that, because there was standing water in those areas, there were disease outbreaks, malaria, dengue, and the other ones, leishmaniasis. So these were some of the health impacts we saw in the areas where we had saltwater intrusion. But other than that, these were the main health issues that we saw. But actually, what happened was people moved away from those areas within months because there was water standing. So nobody was living there.
Right.
They just got
about migration and all the health.
Yeah, it was all migration. Exactly. They moved to the bigger cities.
Right. So these lands become pretty much inhabitable unless we're able to come up with some pretty preventative types of solutions. So a couple other questions, and I know you're a little bit in the hot seat here. What barriers? Thank you so much we've got so many questions from our audience. What barriers have you seen to successfully implementing drought forecast systems? And I know these are huge systems that are run by climatologists. And what barriers do you see in terms of them being successfully implemented?
Okay, so see, for me in Pakistan, I'm just going to talk about Pakistan right now. The biggest barrier was health, and a lot of subjects are devolved. So you have a federal ministry looking at the bigger picture, but then you have provincial ministries. So a lot of time there is a disconnect between the federal ministries as well as the provincial ministries. First is this disconnect. Then in the bureaucratic circle, it's very difficult to bring, like health was really trying hard to bring climate change and agriculture and Ministry of National Food Security. We have a Ministry of National Food Security here, to bring all of them and sit on the same table and talk about initiative on climate and nutrition, keeping in mind that we have one of the highest numbers of wasting and stunting in the world. We have the second highest number of anemic women. So keeping all these in mind, so the biggest issue and the biggest challenge for me as a policymaker while working with the government was the fact that it's very difficult to break the bureaucratic silos, make people sit together. And it's only when all the different departments sit together that you make policies and you collect data from each other, and that is the one which reaches the grassroots level then for implementation. You know, so you have the national tier, then you have the provincial tiers, then you have the district level tiers. Bringing and making everybody sit across the table is the most difficult challenge, and that's because of these silos. A lot of information and a lot of good work that can be done is not done then.
Yeah. No, and I think we hear this again and again, that the science is there, that some of the solutions are there. It's that connection and the communication around implementation that challenges us again and again. And speaking of this, I think one of the questions that always comes to my mind is, how do you think we can keep food security and climate on the policy agenda as we're dealing with so many crises and there's limited attention, right? There's just a limited number of people and resources. How do we continue to maintain this conversation about food security and climate? Because it's just so foundational to, I think, peace and security in the region, to have access to food.
Absolutely. And that's such a wonderful statement that you just made. See, as a lobby of and as a group of practitioners in public health and climate change, the onus of responsibility lies on us to keep on talking about that. This initiative that you started at Columbia University and including climate and nutrition as part of it, and I guess there are about more than 100 participants from all across the world listening to us. So I think this is a group of people who can just keep talking about it and try to connect the dots between climate change, between health, between policy, between nutrition. The resources are limited, but how we divert those resources, the limited resources, the science is there, the knowledge is there. We all know what's happening. All we need to do is just divert those limited resources towards keeping the health of our people, especially the younger generation, intact. For me, what breaks my heart is a child born to a malnourished mother who in the first place, the mother has multi micronutrient deficiencies, but in the first 2 years of their life, that child does not get adequate food to develop into a thriving member of the society who can contribute into the workforce. So what we were trying to do at the ministry was highlight this thing that climate is one of the major drivers for malnutrition. We need to address this because these are the economic dividends for the country. And investing $1 now would have a yield of return of $17. That's what the World Bank says. You invest $1 in nutrition of a child, and you're getting $17 back. So this is the way we were trying to work to make it for the policymakers to understand the cost of inaction and the return on investment. These are the two things which should be part of every policymaker and health practitioners paper or whatever project design. The cost of inaction, if we are not acting now, what are we losing on, and what are the returns of on investment? That's all I can say, because that's how I was trying to do work here.
Yeah, well, you're fighting the good fight, and it's amazing. It's amazing how much you've done.
We all are trying to, honestly. It's not easy.
Yeah, it's incredible. We had, over 700 people listening to your messages today, Maureen. And, I think we all have, we all have this ability to continue to talk about climate and health, continue to talk about the solutions that come out of this in terms of thinking about long-term prosperity, long-term health, and long-term safety. So thank you so much for being here with us today. I know everybody really enjoyed hearing from you, learning about what's happening in Pakistan. And I think we know there's many examples from the region at large, and thinking about how we can bring more voices together to talk about solutions is just so important. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me over.
Amazing. And as a message to all our participants, we did have planned a case study from Dr. Ramesh Burgani, who is from Tehran University of Medical Sciences. We are not in touch with Dr. Burgani right now. We are praying for their safety. And when we're able to, we will try to post that case study on the website. So we will let you know when that case study is available. In the meantime, I hope everybody stays safe. I hope you all are well. Our thoughts are with you, and we will see you next week at our upcoming session. So thank you all, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care.